What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. I got an email from Rod McLarge, CreditDotPinball. Check out his site at CreditDotPinball.com for very in-depth and interesting write-ups on various aspects of the hobby. Once you start reading, it's definitely hard to stop. Credit.pinball.com. So Rod emails and asks, what about the bingo serial numbers? Their location on the game and the format of the number itself. Whether the number is an accurate representation of the number of games made. There are lots of little intricacies with pinball serials and wondering if it's the same with bingos. So, the first thing is that the bingo serials are actually stamped in multiple places. They're stamped on the cabinet body, they're stamped on the playfield, and they're stamped on the head. Now, because they're stamped in all three of these places, you can trace exactly where one of the pieces came from. I have games where the serial numbers don't match. And I've heard stories, just since I started this podcast, I've always wondered why that might be. And the stories that I've heard related on this podcast are that in certain jurisdictions, to get around the laws against operating new equipment or equipment, I'm not really sure what the law was that would require different serials. I don't know why it would be legal to operate that way, but perhaps someone can enlighten me. But what they would do is ship certain parts, and only those parts, across state lines, and then they would ship the other parts or pick up the other parts elsewhere. Now, some way, somehow, this would get around the law. Again, I'm not sure how, but what they would do is just assemble these pieces and then put them out on the street to earn. Now, the location of the serial number on the cabinet is on the right-hand side, directly under the side rail. On the playfield, it's right at the center of the top arch. And on the cabinet head, it's on the right-hand side at the top. Now, the format of these serials is slightly different depending on the location. On the cabinet and head, it has a designator for the game, which is usually the first letters in the name. So, I have a bounty, and the designator is B. I have a double up, and the designator is DUI. There's usually also a 1 after each of these, meaning the first production run, I think, and then a dash, followed by the production number. Now, you had asked Rod about whether these numbers could be believed. And that's a very interesting question, and one that I don't actually have the answer to. I think, based on people that I've talked to and things that I've read, and my own first-hand knowledge with some of these games, that these numbers cannot be believed. I don't know that they ever repeated numbers, although that would certainly be an easy way to get around some of the problems inherent in making these devices, especially in a time where the law had started to crack down on them from a federal and a local perspective. And then you have machines that are being shipped overseas. Do these repeat serials? And then you have machines which are supposed to be shipped overseas, and yet are wired from the factory for US voltages. I find this rather suspicious. So, I am really not certain, but I do know, and I have read, that there was a lot of organized crime involvement in these machines and in Las Vegas at the time of their production. Whether or not that's true, I don't know for sure. I just know what I've read. But what I do know is that I have seen these games with mismatched serials. That's very, very common, at least in this area. And I have seen games which should not have ever been wired from the factory to operate in the US market. And yet here they are. What this says, I think you can piece together for yourselves, but I believe it means that they're fudging the numbers a little bit. That's a polite way to put it, but yeah, I don't think they can be believed, and for those reasons. Now, what's also interesting about bingo serials is that underneath they're also stamped with the date of production. This is highly unusual. If you've been in pinball circles for a while, you understand that normally you don't have that. It's either part of the serial or not available, or it's stamped on a piece of paper affixed to the ball arch, but not stamped into the cabinet itself. This is also very interesting. And why might they need to do that? Well, don't have that answer. But I did want to point out that Rod is one of the admins over at ipsnd.net. That's the Internet Pinball Serial Number Database. They're collecting serial numbers for any pinball game. And I would highly suggest that everyone go register your serials over there. From that, we can put together some of this hidden history on where these games may have wound up, but more importantly, how many were made. It was not unusual, of course, for serial numbers to be padded. You add an extra 1 at the beginning, or you add an extra 500 to the total, and then your numbers look pretty good from the outside. You know, if you're Bally and you're looking at a Gottlieb, if you didn't know that they were doing that, then you'd say, wow, look at how many of these they made. That's not actually the case. And with bingos, I suspect it's the same deal. So, also, if you have bingo serials, Danny Leach is collecting them on his bingo website, danny.cdyn.com. So after you've submitted to the IPSND, please contact Danny with your serials, and he is putting together a bingo-specific kind of view of these serial numbers. Well, I wanted to thank Rod for listening to the show and for submitting the question. And everybody, feel free to do the same. I'm here to help if I can. And thank you again for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.